Welcome to the Froggy Five. I'm your host, Jim Froehlich, founder and managing member of the Froggy Companies, where when it comes to real estate, you can't stop the hop. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to be interviewing myself for this first week of podcasts. And then starting next week, we're going to have guests lined up week after week, just providing tons of insight and valuable lessons about real estate investing and real estate development. For those of you who don't know Jim, he is a full-time real estate investor, real estate developer, and fund manager. He's syndicated over $40 million in the last 4 years, and he's a technical consultant for different investment and development firms. Prior to that, Jim spent 25 years as a technical consultant and program manager for a number of different agencies and branches of the military and government. And before that, he was an Air Force officer. Good afternoon, Jim.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Look forward to digging in here on a few lessons and insight into your real estate journey.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
To begin with, I want to ask you, how did you get into real estate?
Okay, well, I guess I really got started back in the 90s. I'd say I was more a fan and a student of real estate for many years, starting in the mid-90s. I would watch some infomercials, and one that particularly caught my attention was Carlton Sheets. Some of you older people remember Carlton Sheets. He was the no money down man. And I bought into, luckily my wife also agreed, we bought into a big set of cassettes, started educating myself. The package came with cassettes and documentation on how to get into real estate investing with no money down, as the name implied, or little money down. And it was single family homes or 4 units or 6 units, small multifamilies, and creative ways of getting deals done by going through back then the want ads, in the newspaper, things for sale by owners especially, and going through phone calls with people and trying to see what their motivation was for selling, and then come up with creative techniques, mainly seeing if they would take some of their down payment back in the form of a note, which would be a secondary lien if you were to go ahead and get a mortgage on the property, or sometimes an assumable mortgage that they might have. So there were sheets for doing due diligence and contracts, and I really credit the Carlton Sheets program, even though it seemed kind of hokey at the time or infomercial-like. I really credit, I learned a lot from Carlton Sheets, and how to talk to people on the phone about deals, how to do due diligence on deals, how to structure deals. And we went into that, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but we had some false starts, I would say, around 1999 with the first 6 unit, and sort of set that aside for 16 years, the real estate life. Around that same time in the 90s, Robert Kiyosaki came out with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which millions of people have read and have been inspired by, especially in real estate over the years. And that really put my goals relative to real estate in perspective at that time. I was a young Air Force officer, had a young family, but I had a vision in my head that someday I wouldn't be in the E quadrant as an employee, but I would work my way over to the I quadrant as an investor someday. And for those of you who know Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's really about learning how to get passive income by having assets that generate income. And he talks about his real estate journey in there. And so there's a whole group of books around that. One of them's written by Ken McElroy, The ABCs of Real Estate Investing, and that sat on our shelf for years. We probably dusted it off around 2015. And at that time, I decided, hey, I'm really going to go do real estate someday. And really, I envision myself as being a writer up here in New Hampshire, and kind of always have. So that's sort of a little dream I have of writing a novel. I actually stopped working on a master's degree once to write a novel, and that manuscript sat 300 and some pages for years. So setting that aside, I imagine that I want to create wealth with passive investments to be able to do other things in my life someday. So that was sort of a little bit of a motivator at that time. But from, I'll say, 2015 to 2019, at which time I decided to do it full-time, take my hobby of investing and go full-time in real estate. And what I was doing was I was driving several times a week, 5-hour round trips to work as a systems engineer. I've been successful for many years in that occupation. And I was just listening to hundreds of hours of podcasts and learning more about investing and reading books, like the ABCs of real estate investing to start with. And I started reaching out to people and getting involved in deals first as a small co-GP on deals. And then later I ran into a guy who said, hey, find me any deal up to 60 million that's good and we'll fund it. And that really gave me extra motivation to really get involved in the game. And I really became attracted to the syndication side and trying to get there quicker because I was already in my mid 40s. And then by then I was 48 when I went over full time into real estate and sort of burned the bridges behind me on what I was doing. And mostly in due diligence with new development and kind of haven't looked back. So that's kind of how I got into real estate.
Did you have to overcome anything in particular or persevere through anything on your real estate journey?
Oh, sure. Great question. So I would say my life from birth to age 23 was all about perseverance. But I won't bore you with my sad story except to say that I was entrepreneurial. And I would say from the time I was around 6 years old, I started finding ways to work all the time to get my own lunch money, to buy lunch instead of being given a free lunch at school, to get the different types of shoes or clothes that I wanted. Sometimes as I became a young teenager and we didn't have much, but I was just sort of always trying to earn money and look for ways to creatively to get money. And, I went on a journey that sort of culminated with me eventually graduating from Georgia Tech and being commissioned as a lieutenant in the Air Force at 23. My life has been fully blessed for the next 30 years. I have had leukemia for the last 20 years, but the last 5 I haven't been on medicine. So I've been blessed in all these ways. But perseverance specifically within the real estate realm, I'll just say that one of the biggest things I had to overcome was from already being a successful engineer. And, I'm just a solid middle-class guy who grew up in a blue-collar family and sort of that type of mentality, wanting to go over into real estate later in life in my mid-40s and not having a full nest egg buffer built up where I could take time to do that, created some challenges for me and a little bit of a fear factor of how do I make a lateral move. And so that would be, a challenge I had. I overcame that by packaging up all the skills that I developed over the years and experience and figuring out how I could apply that, how and where in the real estate world of development and investing. And then I met a guy who's really been my mentor, John Bogdasarian from Permanis, who sort of took a chance with me to really let me deep dive and work for him. And it's been great ever since.
Is there anything in particular that motivates you when dealing with real estate investing and development?
Sure, absolutely. I'm motivated. Like I said, I was always motivated originally to create passive income, right? I've been sort of an independent moving type of guy throughout my career. I was telecommuting back in the 90s before other people were doing it. I wanted to, like most people, live life on my own terms as soon as I could. I watched my father be more of a company man, work at a sugar mill for many years. He died broke. He died owing more money than he came in the world with. And I decided from a young age that I was always going to be landing on my feet no matter what I did. So I'm always motivated by that, by that experience, that sort of hard struggle of childhood as well, if you will, that I was blessed with. And I want to be able to help my grown sons. I want to be able to help my grandchildren if they need it someday, and just have the flexibility and the freedom that comes with being an investor and being in the real estate world, because the real estate world is so big. It's like an ocean of ways to make money. And so I'm motivated by that. And then beyond that, I've got other sort of more idealistic motivations, and they come more get added on as I learn more and I figure out like how other people in different locations are living, and how important it is, I guess I would say, for people to have good living circumstances and how much good you can do. So I'm kind of hoping to do a lot more in the future. I got to get to that spot, I should say, of having enough money to do more to help society. But I'll say when I first decided I wanted to really do real estate full time, I had the idea for the Froggy REIT, the Real Estate Investment Trust, and that Froggy REIT was going to be to provide safer, cleaner, friendlier living for people. And a lot of that was based on my own childhood of having to Our neighborhood was a little rough. You were always running from dogs or bullies, and if you couldn't outrun them, then you had to fight them. And I think, and there's that can be helpful to a person in the long run, but children shouldn't necessarily be living in fear or these kind of situations when they're young. And I think there are a lot of people living in communities that deal with that. And so I imagine if we could get Class D multifamilies and turn them into Class C and make them more secure and cleaner and make sure that people are safe, or Class C and turn them into Class B. It was sort of a vision I had with the Froggy REIT. And I naively at that time thought I could just this is probably in 2010 I started thinking about this, that I could get thousands of people to invest. And that's when I come to understand securities laws and the SEC laws around that, realized I couldn't just go out and advertise and get 2,000 other military veterans to invest with me on a multifamily. That's becoming more accessible, but there was, the Reg A versus Reg D, there's a lot to learn and digest in there. So I'll say, yeah, all of that's a motivation. I'll package that up. That's a long answer to a short question.
Are there any current or emerging technologies in the real estate development and investment space that you feel are going to make a huge impact on the future?
Yeah, well, absolutely. There is a ton happening with technology, and it's happening so fast and it's so hard to keep track of that we actually decided to build part of our business around this fact, and that's Froggy X Factor. So if you want to check us out, if you want to deep dive into areas, go to froggyxfactor.com and check out our one-stop hop. And there you'll find tons of areas you can dig deep in, everything from beginning to learn about real estate, investing and development, to very advanced technology, to emerging technologies. And one thing that we've discovered is that there are so many new startups and there's so much happening with property technology and construction technology that it's hard to keep up with. And so I figure with my 25 years of technical background in systems engineering, and that I might as well apply some of that to keeping track of the latest. So I'll mention two that are both current and emerging. Okay, one is blockchain. A lot of people are familiar with blockchain from cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and that raises some alarm and fear with people when you talk about that relative to real estate. But it shouldn't. What I've discovered and educated myself on over the last year plus is the promise of blockchain, the security of blockchain, the flexibility and decentralization of finance potentially related to blockchain. And so with blockchain in both property technology, prop tech, and financial technology, fintech, there's sort of a convergence in the world of real estate. And one area that I know it's going to make a big difference is transactionally, because historically, transactions for real estate are a pain, right? The title work, the mortgage work, it's all kind of a pain. But now you're coming up with ways to turn weeks into days and days into hours and hours into minutes on transactions, we'll just say, keeping things more transparent, faster, cheaper. So I think there's great promise in that. The other thing with blockchain is that for a while now, people have been able to fractionalize real estate. And so that earlier vision that I had back in 2010 about the Froggy REIT and people investing, you could do that today. Anybody can go with like $10, $50, $100. You can go online. There's several firms that offer you can buy into a rental property. And some of those are our partners, actually. And all of those are fractionalized, but they're not all tokenized, but some of them are. So the difference here is that for all of you that think of Bitcoin, I don't know, the whole world of cryptocurrency is foreign to me, but I know there's volatility in it, great volatility in it, right? There's not great volatility in real estate historically, right? That's why me personally, even though all the smart guys invest, in stock markets and stocks and bonds and real estate, and it's a diversified portfolio, and historically over 150 years, people say either 8 or 11% has been the historic average for real estate as a whole versus stocks, private equity as a whole. But what gets kept out of that discussion a lot of times is the volatility of the stock market. You're way more likely to get caught in a down cycle in a stock market than you are in real estate, right? Real estate moves in pretty predictable cycles most of the time, and it moves slowly because it's illiquid, right? So back to the blockchain discussion. People are now starting to realize the value of tokenizing real assets, whether it's art or whether it's a a sports team or what, it's a real asset, but it's real estate is a real asset. And now people are starting to tokenize real estate and place tokens against them and then let people buy them as fractions. And there's a promise of a secondary exchange of those tokens for the real estate. Now, I'm a little more skeptical of that because while it does seem great, the logic would lead us to believe that if there are secondary exchanges of tokens against real estate, the same things that people do, rationally or irrationally in a stock market environment, people will do with those tokens in a real estate market, right? And now suddenly it becomes liquid. But there are a lot of smart people trying to make sure there is no volatility in the things that they tokenize when it comes to real estate. So there's great promise with that. I'll probably leave it at that. At a different time, I'll talk to you about the other. I'll just touch on it real quick. But the other area I'm very excited about is construction technology, materials, the use of timber instead of concrete steel for buildings up to 270 feet, up to 18 stories now. There's a lot happening relative to that. And then in general, net zero housing, or the way, you keep energy bills down to zero potentially in the future, and passive housing, which is different, but it's related in that passive housing is a construction method that helps you maximize your energy efficiency with smart systems, with building products, and also those buildings last longer, like hundreds of years longer than what your normal construction is today. There is a convergence here in this world of construction technology that promises to potentially give us more affordable housing with using less energy. And I'm just very excited about it in general, but I'll leave it at that. Thanks for asking.
What is one lesson that you've had to learn the hard way in this line of work? Can you describe it and let us know if there's anything you've changed about your business in order to avoid making the same mistake twice?
Oh, yeah. I'm learning a lot. I'm still learning a lot every day, but there's some big ones I've already learned. And the one easiest one is the one time I've lost so far, which was $10,000. And so a few years back, I had, there were 4 lots for sale in my town. And I thought, hey, this is a great location in the subdivision, 4 lots. They're all right next to each other. 2 are across the street from the other 2. We'll lock them up. We'll buy them. We'll build spec homes on them, and we'll sell these 4 homes. And so we pro forma that out, and I reached out to a former partner who's in Colorado who just cashed in a bunch of money, and he said, "Sure, yeah, that sounds great." He was all in. In order to get it locked up at the price I wanted, I offered the guy who owned it, who was my former accountant, by the way, retired accountant, $10,000, non-refundable. And fast forward through the process of we were getting close to closing time, and the potential partner called up and said, his brother-in-law had looked at the market and he didn't think it was going to work and yada, 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 and now he wasn't going to do it. Well, I didn't have enough money to both close those lots and build the houses out, and I didn't want to tie up all my money in those 4 lots during that time because I had other things going on. And so it was too late to get another partner in the deal, and I lost the $10,000. And my former accountant thanked me, said he still loved us, knew I was a good guy. He's happy to have that $10,000 to help him with more pickleball tournaments or whatever he was doing. So it was a tough lesson learned, and I'll never make that mistake again. It was the first and last time I lost money that way in real estate. And knock on wood, I'm still only 5 years into it, but that's all the money I've lost, and I've gained many more multiples of that, 150 times more multiple of that. And so I'll give another lesson, and it's a 2-for-1. And this is that false start I was talking about in the 90s, where I was in the Carlton Sheets coaching program. I had a guru out in Utah, and they were attached to a mortgage company. And I got my wife and I, along with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, we tied up a 6-unit in Manchester, New Hampshire, and got the owner to agree to take back 30% in the form of a note. So we were going to get a 70% mortgage. We had very little money at the time, but we were super excited about this deal. And this Utah mortgage company approved of our loan. So when it got close to closing time, though, they contacted me and said that they couldn't do it because they're not licensed in New Hampshire. They didn't realize the property was in New Hampshire somehow, which is still blows my mind. We were living on an Air Force base in Massachusetts at the time. So we had some egg on our face. We went back to the seller. He didn't believe us, didn't want to give us our deposit back. We had to write a demand letter. So we learned the lesson of don't just trust your guru, I guess, if you're in a coaching program, which I'm not a huge fan of, but some people have benefited from. You make sure you know all about your lender as much as you can and give yourself options. That's part A. Part B, we learned as a bonus in this deal, and that was 6 months later when we moved to New Hampshire. We heard that a property manager who happened to be the seller of the 6 unit we were going to buy had been convicted for fraudulent information regarding lead paint in his units. And unfortunately, a child had died, and he was actually convicted for, I guess, not disclosing information. So that one's hard. It's hard to fight fraud when it's on the other side. But when you're getting into older units, especially those built before the 70s and things are painted over or whatever, know what you're going into for safety reasons, because it's not just, it's not just a pain in your butt you're worried about. There could be lives on the line, and you could get convicted if you don't do the right thing. So that was a great lesson learned as well. So yeah, that's all I got. Now I'm wondering, can you describe the best deal you've ever done? Not necessarily the most profitable one, but one that you're very proud of. Yeah, that's easy. That's the fun stuff, right? We talk about the bad stuff, losing 10,000, but let me talk about a fun one, and that is, from the time of June 2022 until 18 months later, in 2024, the beginning of 2024, we just did a home run of a deal, and what it was a defunct subdivision. Well, I wouldn't say totally defunct, right? We had driven in this subdivision 5-6 years ago and realized that it was a terrible road here in small town New England in a pretty good subdivision with like middle upper class homes. And we were wondering why there were all these vacant lots. So there were like 24 vacant lots throughout the subdivision, horrible road. And so it seemed like an opportunity, right? So we did some digging and contacted the town and found out these were all on the town tax rolls. Back taxes hadn't been paid for 10 years. And what happened was the previous developer had abandoned the subdivision at the time instead of fixing this road, which the base layer had never been done the right way. And the residents in there sued that former developer for $1 million or $1.5 million, the price that the road was going to cost. And, they were bitter. This guy declared bankruptcy, left town, left the state, maybe left the country, I guess. And and so I approached the town and said, hey, if we agreed to pay all the back taxes and we agreed to fix this road the way it was supposed to be done, could we get these lots? And, we did the math on it and it made sense to us. And at that time we were thinking about getting the lots and building spec homes. So I lined up a partner who could do the road and wanted to build out homes in there. So we got the town to agree because there was no other developer that wanted to do it. It was a private road. Apparently there was like maybe one other developer interested, but not unless it was going to be taken over by the city. And so the town really wanted to get these lots off their rolls and get their back taxes. So we signed an agreement. I had a partner lined up. That partner, we had some challenges with this deal because the partner who we first lined up with, they looked at the metrics of it all and said, okay, once this deal goes through and you close with the town, we'll just buy you out for $300,000. So we were like, wow, okay, that's $300,000, and that's a quick hit. We'll take that. That's great. Best deal of my life, right? So, but that partner backed out shortly before closing. So I had to go find another partner who wasn't necessarily interested in building out spec homes, but was interested in the deal metrics. And so the deal went kind of like this. We put in $50,000, they put in $350,000. We had to close the land and we had to go through a quieting title process. We weren't sure at the time we had to do this quiet title process. So I learned a big lesson there with legal work because the people who had the lien against the previous developer, they could have signed a lien waiver and let us just go in and fix the road. But a couple of them held out and didn't want to do that. So we had to go through this quiet title process, legal process, to say that, yes, the town took back those lots the right way, that they gave us deed of trust, that everything was done legitimately, that we were the rightful owners and nobody else in the world was the rightful owner of this property right now, right? And we had the obligation with the town. We were going to fix that road to the specs that the town has, so that hopefully the residents could get together and petition the town to have that road taken over as a town road someday if they wanted to. So of course we were going to keep our obligations, but a couple people didn't trust us. So that created an extra year of time. So get this, we performed a 3-year project to sell these 24 lots for $100,000 each. So we said $2.4 million. The road could cost $1 million, and the purchase and the rest of the legal work and other stuff would be like maybe $500,000. So $1.5 million in, $2.4 million out, up to 3 years. It's a good deal, right? So we went down this road and we were really sure of the market. And I'll talk in another podcast about submarkets and how important understanding submarkets in secondary and tertiary markets is. And that's what we're always excited about, because that's where people don't pay attention much. The big guys are always looking at the urban areas. So in this case, long story short, I'll tell you, we took a year to quiet that title. But during that process, we started taking reservations, non-binding reservations, lining up everything we did, line up the road work, and we got it all done. And we got it all done for $1.5 million. And then we maximized, we may be at 2.7 million sales. But the bottom line was that we went into the deal with everybody that puts money into it, the partnership, would first get their money back and 18% preferred return. And then after that, we'll split the profits 50-50. It's a very typical deal structure we do for JV agreements. And in this case, we all got our money back plus 18%. And then we split the 1.2 million profit. And it all happened within a year and a half. So it's super home run. Best deal of my life. I'm hoping to replicate it again and again.
Can you share with us any creative financing or funding techniques that are helping you today or have helped you in the past?
Sure. Yeah, I touched on one. So with creative financing, I touched on one. I started my real estate journey with the no money down idea. And so that was really good because it taught me one end of the spectrum of always start if you're buying something yourself from a single family owner, always start the process with, hey, will you take back some in the form of a note? It's a great way to get into something that you might not otherwise have had enough of a down payment to get into. I will caution people, though, one thing I've learned along the way with the no money down deals or low money down deals is that you really don't want to over leverage yourself. So ideally you want to have 20 to 30% equity in anything that you buy. So if you're in this position where you get like 100% owner financing, only 5% down, this is kind of what led to a lot of the problems with the housing bubble burst of 2008, where people had these loans that they really maybe shouldn't have. I benefited from one of those. We got our own home for like 5% down. So I learned when I had my own home built, I used the creative financing techniques that I learned from Carlton Sheets to get into my own home at the time for almost no money down. I think maybe not even 5%. And so I've used that technique of getting low money down. But like I said, always have a plan to de-lever what you're doing, to build up enough equity so that if something does change, you're not stuck with so much debt on a property. So that's one of the things we look for when we talk to partners about their debts. We're more into providing equity into deals than doing debt, because generally I'm having partners come to us that have term sheets lined up for loans, and we're always checking into the details of those. So along the creative financing side, I'll step back and talk about wholesaling on the end of the spectrum where people don't have little or no money and they're trying to do stuff in real estate, right? And the wholesaling comes up, and that's essentially, to use round numbers, like you go out and find a home that's really worth maybe $100,000, but you can get it for $70,000, and you know that there's a lot of people out there that would be willing to pay $80,000. So you get it under contract, make sure it's an assignable contract for $70,000, and then you flip it and reassign it to someone who's going to buy it for $80,000, and you get $10,000. So there's a whole series of educational videos and books about how to do that. We started doing that several years ago to sort of try out that area, but it didn't feel right to us. It didn't feel natural to us, because you do have to deal with a lot of situations, right? Where if you're not taking a high road and doing things honestly, a lot of people in the wholesaling industry, I'll just say it bluntly, a lot of people get involved and they don't know what they're doing. And then a lot of people try to just take advantage of people who either somebody just died in their family or they're down and out or something just, is close to foreclosure. There's a market for it and it's actually helpful. It's usually win-win. It's why there's a whole, WeBuyUglyHouses.com. There's people that want, to quickly sell their house without the hassle. And, but within that, I'll just say that from the financing perspective, the people that do it best have large cash buyers list. They're basically out there finding good deals, and they have cash buyers who they know are reputable. They're contractors or house flippers that want to do things the right way. And I'll just say my word of caution with the wholesaling as a whole, if somebody's thinking about using that as a way to get past financing hurdles, is that you don't want to get started in this business tying up properties that you don't intend to close, or that you have no intention of closing unless you go out on a limb and try to find a buyer. You want to know that you have buyers already lined up for that property and that you're doing it the right way, or else you'll quickly lose your reputation. And so now then I'll jump up to the commercial side. I'll just give one other thing related to this. When you're buying anything over 4 units, it becomes a commercial property, and it becomes more, the lending part becomes more about what type of net operating income that asset generates, right? So you can, I read about and heard when I was starting in real estate years ago that, hey, you don't need to have any money and you can just do these large commercial deals because it's based on the property. Well, that's not necessarily true. You can't yourself just go get a big loan because you found a property that supports that. What you have to do is start teaming up with other people who have experience in these areas, property management, having done ground up development deals, acquiring or have some type of portfolio. And if you're on the lower end of that spectrum, say you don't have a ton of net worth and liquidity yourself, what you need to do are create valuable relationships. And every valuable relationship has to come with you bringing some to the equation, right? Either you're bringing some sweat equity, some knowledge, or some people that that have money, that believe in you, or something that you can bring to the other side. You can't just show up with people that show up talking to people who have big portfolios of multifamilies or have a bunch of money and say, hey, I want to be your partner and you want to help me, you want to mentor me. It doesn't really work that way. So I would say the good thing about it is that it is true that if a deal is truly good, and it's hard to know that when you're first starting out, what's really a good deal, because you don't see it as clearly until you've been through hundreds of them. If it's truly good, you will find a way to finance it. And what I mean by that is there are partners out there, there are people looking to purchase that. And a lot of times they're guys that are just have big net worth and liquidity who they recognize a good deal when they see it. And they can just sign on to a team that's going after a loan, and their balance sheet is going to carry the day. So it's not like your personal credit or what you have is going to bring the whole team down. It's the person with the biggest bank account and experience who's riding on that team, who's willing to sign off on it, even when it's a non-recourse loan, and usually the big deals are. It's important to have those types of relationships. So I just say that from a creativity standpoint in financing, building big partnerships up with credible people is the best way to go. Hey, thanks for having me on. If anybody else wants to find out more about what we're doing, please come to froggycompanies.com. Check out our 3 different business areas. We also have the Froggy Fund 1 that's now open for up to $18 million. We're going to be investing that $18 million across a diverse number of assets, cash flowing and ground up. And I'm really excited about this fund and really confident that we can outperform most of the other people out there in terms of what we invest in and how we do our due diligence and the type of partners we put together. So it's great talking to you, and see you next time.